Welcome, Sojourners. This is Jonathan with Sojourners Awake, and this is our production of Sojourner Spotlight, RPG news and interviews. And today, we have the spotlight on Ted, who plays Felthran Grovelore in the Blood War series, and is currently playing Vaughn Steeplebottom in the Bookish and the Brave. And so for now, our story continues. Our very first game was March 2020, and I remember you were so encouraging to play with and so insistent that we play that we just called each other.
Yeah.
Like I remember doing that, like that one. It was just a phone call of D&D.
Yeah, I didn't know how it was going to work. Obviously, I'd never played any games but live, but man, it's worked out great.
I think how we've overcome that, and you can tell me what you think about this. I do a little bit more directing as to like who's talking, who's in the spotlight, who's next. And as we've done that, you guys have learned to listen to each other's rhythms and pick up when it's time for someone to stop talking and for the other person to start.
Yeah, I agree. I think, your direction has been great. And then the three of us have just kind of figured out how to know when who's going to talk and all that good stuff. It does work out pretty well. And when you're in person, you can obviously see each other's faces and know who's going to start talking a little bit quicker, who sat up in their chair a little bit or started to lean forward. It's a little easier to pick up in person than it is online.
Tell me about the difference between Felthran and Vaughn, and maybe any similarities you've noticed between those two characters.
So Felthran was a dwarf who, a little bit of backstory, so kind of a tiny bit of spoiler for those of you that haven't listened to the story, but I won't go too deep into it. Felthran was a dwarf who was basically removed from his home and ended up spending 100 years in the forest where he connected with some druids and practiced druidic arts. And then as life came back around and he ended up needing to adventure a little bit, and there was purpose in life for him outside of the forest, he quickly tapped back into his upbringing, which was as a fighter defender for his dwarven clan. And so that's how he plays out the campaign. Mechanically, he was a second level druid and then just took fighter all the way through from there. But so one of the similarities between the two of them is my intention for both of them were to kind of be a little bit background characters, maybe not the face of the party. And it just doesn't happen that way. And I really want to play one of those characters someday, but Vaughn was supposed to be this kind of background quiet guy too. And then I look at the other two characters and they're both trying to play that direction too. And I think, oh, well, I guess Vaughn becomes the, not necessarily the leader, but kind of the face man of this party as well, which is hilarious because also mechanically, neither one of these characters were rolled up as charisma-based characters. So they're doing Felthran was the worst. I think he actually had a -1 in charisma for his modifier. So he was stepping up to be the face of the party all the time and then just rolling garbage when he had to roll for it, and which made for fun encounters. But Felthran was... I think the similarity is they both see themselves as the defender of their party mates, and they're both willing to and even desirous to jump in to defend the people that need defending, and especially their companions.
With Felthran, I think going back to his druid ways, you did such a good job laying the groundwork. This is what I imagined him to be. He had a really bad experience losing his hometown and then just retreated and pretty much has resigned to retire just taking care of his simple parcel of land, and then was really, called to action to get back in the game. And then right at that level 3, you were like, hey, can I take fighter class and start using shields and metal weapons and get back in that groove? And we told that story of Felthran like laying aside his druidic ways, not forgetting them completely, but really kind of waking up from sleep. I saw him doing that. Is is that what you saw?
Yeah, I think that's a really great evaluation. And as I remember back, I think there were many episodes where that pendulum slowly swang from being a druid to tapping back into his fighter roots until he was a full blown fighter. I don't think that actually happened until, man, maybe 10 or 12 episodes in, 10 or 12 sessions in, where he finally was embracing, yeah, this is who I am. And the other stuff, it's still part of who I am. I spent a long time doing it, but I am actually this fighter. And that's kind of when he stepped forward too, which is hilarious because obviously fighters do a lot of damage when they fight, but as far as if we were to go back and do the math, I would guess that the other party members probably did equal or more damage than I did along the way. But somehow I was the front guy, and and wanted to be, and felt like I was supposed to be, or Felthran was supposed to be.
Thinking about Felthran, a lot of times he did a lot of speech and, like you said, being the face of the party. And there was some level of challenge, and I called for a roll, and the dice didn't favor it, and I would have to make up a reason as to why Felthran's not making headway. But I noticed Bramble at that point would step in, and that's a really cool dynamic that I see happen with players. In that, just because a player fails at something doesn't mean it's the end of the story. Another player can pick up where they left off and kind of catch the rebound. And you and Brandon definitely developed a good like back and forth, Abbott and Costello kind of dynamic where Felthran would set it up, it wouldn't work, and then Bramble would be right there catching the rebound in whatever social situation there was in. And usually what Bramble said usually worked because he had like a plus 11 to charisma or something. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, Brandon's as a player, he's incredible with following the story and knowing at any given moment how he can contribute or support what's happening, so that when something does go sideways, he's right there to pick it up. And I think it's phenomenal play with somebody that can see the game in his mind like that and be ready to step forward and make something happen. So yeah, it's been great. I feel like if Felthran, or if I seem like a good player when I'm playing Felthran and Vaughn, I think it's largely contributed to how good of players Brandon and Patrick are, because I think they really make me look good in a lot of situations. With other players, I may just look like a stupid guy that's trying to take charge, but they really do make the whole thing come together and make it work well.
Vaughn is very similar to Felthran in that he is kind of the reluctant face of the party. But unlike Felthran, Vaughn was woken up into a nightmare, and I thrust a pretty large tragedy on you guys in the very beginning of the story by burning your home. So this is a two-part question. How did Vaughn experience all that? How did Ted experience all that thematically? And then what might Vaughn want to further explore with Boshin, considering he had spent so much time there? Now he's in Baldtop Library. Would he ever want to go back? Would he ever want to explore?
Vaughn's lifestyle in Boshin was very dualistic. He was the heir to the leadership of his royal family, or his upper class family, but then he was also spending so much time in the lower city, helping people out and caring for the poor, and representing the order of the monks with the people there. And I think that's really what he wanted to do. And so to lose his family obviously was tragic, and very, very hard on him. He knew what he was supposed to do before that happened, and so it didn't sway his path necessarily. But as far as Boshin goes, I am confident that Vaughn would love to go back, check on his friends that live in the lower city, the people that he's met along the way. He made some good friends there, and people that he'd helped out. Felix. I think about Felix, the crippled guy that he had that conversation with, one of the first sessions, and I think he would like to go incognito. And then there's a part of him too that kind of like the little kid who kicks the robber in the shin and the guy laughs at him. I think Vaughn wants to grow up and then go find Basile and figure out how he can stop this guy, because yeah, definitely somebody killing your family is a significant motivation to try to put an end to what that guy's doing.
Yeah, that's the second time I've heard Lord Basile needs to be dealt with. So I'm thinking of drawing that out. It definitely seems to be the thread that everyone's wanting to follow. Well, how does Vaughn then relate to Sterling? What's that relationship like between Vaughn and Sterling? And in case you didn't hear, I'll give you the details. Sterling regarded Vaughn as a little bit of a competition.
It's funny. I think Vaughn looks at Sterling as a, just a really naive, kind of a pest, kind of lacks focus, lacks discipline, lacks motivation, which is not true, of course, because he's got this desire to learn and he wants to do all these things. But those aren't the things that pique Vaughn's interest. Vaughn's all about the task at hand and physical fitness and being strong and being prepared and knowing where to go and what to do and when to go and when to do. And I think Sterling's strengths lie in the exact opposite of the realm of activity from Vaughn. So I think Vaughn would see him kind of like the session when we were going through the rooms and we were trying to find out, when we were dealing with the book, and he got distracted by that kid writing poetry and he just got stuck there, and that's kind of how Vaughn views Sterling at this point. Is like, come on, let's go. Little focus, little attention, little motivation, and a little bit of sense of urgency. Stop fooling around with poem lyrics and gazing at the stars and wanting to read all the books. Let's just get things done.
That is a perfect dynamic, and it balances so well. The story kind of expands into, chasing cats and chasing gooses. Sterling definitely provides that. He moves throughout Baldtop very well, and then Vaughn getting things back on track. And like you said, yes, I think Patrick would agree. Sterling is a bit naive. He's not experienced all the ways of the world that maybe Vaughn has at least seen, if not experienced.
Right. Yeah, I would say seen more than experienced. I think, although he's not super young, he's in his late 20s, and he comes from a family that gave him, kind of like at Baldtop in Boshin, up until the rebellion, he had kind of free reign to be where he wanted to be when he wanted to be there. So he's seen a lot, he's experienced a lot, but I think he's experienced a lot through other folks, and I think his life and lifestyle were pretty simplistic. I think he did the things that a nobleman does, and then he did the things that a monk does, and he didn't stray from either one of those tasks very often.
Regarding Hawkins, he has described Vaughn as an older brother. Very interesting dynamic. Considering that Vaughn has lived this noble life in which most of his life, and especially his parents' life, the nobles experienced the height of power in Boshin. And Vaughn's generation was the one that kind of saw Boshin tank and crash and burn and develop corruption and revolution. If Hawkins sees Vaughn as an older brother, how, considering where Vaughn has come from, how would he relate to Hawkins?
I think Vaughn sees Hawkins as a little brother, but even more than that, someone that just needs to be protected. Because he hears the stories about Hawkins' parents and their influence and who they are and such, but all he sees is a little tiny, somewhat nervous, somewhat timid, um, not necessarily cowardly, but maybe a little even cowardly guy. And as a bigger, stronger, somewhat physically imposing guy. I mean, I know he's not as big as Sterling, but I think he feels like a physical presence. And so to have somebody who's small and timid, I think Vaughn feels like protecting Hawkins is the number one priority in the process. Kind of feels like Sterling could survive a blow or two, and but Hawkins needs to be protected. And it's, mechanically speaking, that's not true at all. But but as the story goes, and as Vaughn would see it, he just kind of sees Sterling as the happy-go-lucky guy, and Hawkins as the timid the timid little guy. And but he also leans heavily on Hawkins' intellect, and really values what Hawkins can bring to the table in that way, because Vaughn, while he's not dumb, he has very little interest in the book learning that the other two guys do. And so if he can bypass a couple hours of book learning by asking 10 minutes of questions, he's going to do that every single time. And Hawkins is his go-to.
I remember that that scene was set up so perfectly, and when Vaughn walked in the room and said, "Okay, what do I need to know for the test?" And you capitalized on Hawkins' ability just to skim through tons of information and bring out just the details. And of course, Hawkins said, like, "Yeah, you think they could have put this in 1,200 pages? It could have whittled down to 12 pages of what you just need to know for the test," which has been fun to see, because Bald Top's not perfect. It's not a perfect setting. It's interesting to see the level of critique the players and characters have come to describe in the setting, which I've picked up on and decided, okay, yeah, Bald Top's got a little bit more of maybe a bureaucratic process that can seem really confusing to someone who's so pragmatic as Vaughn.
Yeah, Vaughn for sure is pragmatic, and he's also not. He joined the monastery for a reason. He made relationship, and that was how he did his learning, was through relationship and mentorship. And then at the library, he did as much book learning as he had to, but really his gains came through his time with Sigurd. So that's what he wants. He's not interested in book learning, and he understands that he's in a place that's what people are there for, but that's not his thing. And so he's always going to prefer to be in a mentor relationship, sitting down with somebody over an ale or a meal to glean information from them that way, versus taking the time to read a book. And so I think, not necessarily in an arrogant way or a judgmental way, but I think he looks around and sees these people that live for the books and feels like they're really missing out on life. Because, man, somebody else could read 100 hours and then tell you for 15 minutes, and you'll know most of what they know, and you could be doing other things. That's how I think how he would go about it.
I think that's why I like playing with you so much, because that is a very different character than Felthran. And I've found it sometimes difficult to just stick with a character ideal. And you've played Vaughn very well in sticking with that ideal. I mean, you've said it perfectly. He sees like, well, I could spend 15 minutes listening to someone talk about the book and still have the exact same information. So that's a great character ideal, and I think you've stuck with it well, contrasting with Felthran, who was a completely different person. So that's why it's fun playing and role playing with you, Ted. I've enjoyed that greatly. Yeah.
Well, and of course, we all know that it's not true at all. Like he can't just have a 15-minute conversation and know everything that everybody else knows. But in his mind, he knows enough that it's okay. and I'm sure that's going to bite him in the backside at some point here. But for now, he's good with it. He's okay with the idea that I know enough about that stuff. I think he's the guy that would dominate PE and celebrate his C minuses. I think he's that kid.
Well, speaking of getting bit in the butt, and speaking of Vaughn's low charisma, in the story, Vaughn failed a charisma saving throw against a fey creature, a dryad. And when I designed the encounter, I was thinking of, okay, an interesting way for you guys to get to the wilderness. I wanted to be some threat of life, but I also wanted there to be some kind of baggage you could carry with you. And I've been exploring the idea of like, okay, how do fey creatures come into being? And, in my world, Feywild is called Dreamland. And so it's very crafted through dreams and imagination, a lot of magical power there. And I decided like, okay, there's going to be this dryad and she's going to desire the sojourners to come through and get eaten by the wolves to serve her master. But she's also got some personal ambition as well. She wants to create a fairy to kind of prolong her existence and, create something in the world, not just be a stagnant person, but to bring something to life. But she can't do it unless she charms a mortal to give her a kiss. And that kiss births her creative process to life, and she can make a fairy, and then that's her baby, And Vaughn got to be the father of that creation in the world. And if you've listened to it, you probably know, okay, that's what's happened. But Vaughn doesn't really know at all. So how do you think that encounter went? And keeping in mind, I, as a dungeon master, always have a plan for how everything could either help or hinder a character and provide some level of challenge, as well as provide some level of benefit. How do you think that encounter went, and what kind of future do you might see Vaughn experiencing with this plot thread?
Well, I love it. Anytime something can go so sideways like that, it makes me happy. I think about Felthran and Yinagu. That's one of my favorite moments that we've played together, because it just went horribly wrong and it just kept going horribly wrong. And I love that. I think when the dice make the game go sideways and everybody has to adjust to it, and we get to develop a part of the storyline that we never thought we would go to, or maybe you did, but I never did. Yeah, that brings me great joy, because it's really easy to play a linear game, and but to do something that gets crooked is a lot of fun. So getting charmed was no big deal. I thought that was fun. And then the fact that I didn't really ever have a chance or get to break that charm was added some serious tension to the moment. And then I just had to play it the way it was, right? Vaughn was charmed. So what's he gonna do? He's gonna do what he has to do. He's gonna give her a kiss. And of course he doesn't know that that's how the procreation process happens for the Fey folk. So if and when that comes to light for him, I think he will lose his mind a little bit. But I don't know how that will play out. I don't see him as an overtly violent person, but I think there could be some non-living carnage at that moment. I think he could definitely get a little frustrated and maybe need a moment or 12 and try to figure out what that means. Honestly, I don't know how he would react, especially if Trina comes at him wanting there to be some sort of relationship in this process. He was manipulated, so I don't think he would have any interest in being around her again, as he proved the next time he saw her. I don't think that'll change, and I think he'll feel even more manipulated if and when he gets this information and figures this out.
So that reminds me of like using curses in Dungeons and Dragons, because a lot of times when you impose like a curse upon a player, it can simply be solved with a spell. And then another player casts a spell, restores you back to normal, and there's no real, the tension is just immediately present and then gone. And what I like to do in my games, whether it be like a werewolf curse or a fey curse or some kind of charm, that effect tends to go on throughout time, develops into a storyline, and then is resolved with some kind of arc, whether it be you discover the cure for lycanthropy in a well, some kind of like pool of life, or finding out, this creature was created by imagination, by inspiration, and now is present in the world. Uh, what does that mean for the rest of the plot? What does that mean for the character development? Obviously, it's not like the same thing as having a living, like a child per se. We didn't really explore that theme. This is more something like, this is a creative force that happened because of a dice decision, and the chips fell towards Vaughn. Had it been Hawkins, had it been Sterling, it would be completely different because of the players, and like what you said, like how would Vaughn respond to this new information? We'll just leave it at that. Just like, that's just going to be new information for him, which is something I wanted to explore as a dungeon master. Like, what happens if I hand a player and a character, surprise, you have this added responsibility. Now you still have to accomplish your mission, but what's it going to look like from here on out? Which, with everything you've described of Vaughn, thinking about like his lineage, family was a big deal, right? His family of the past is gone. This creature coming into his life is the closest thing he might have to as a family as far as like a creative process goes, with the exception of Sterling and Hawkins, of course, who are sojourners with him. There's a lot of interesting themes to pull at. So that's a big world of inspiration that we'll just have to see how it turns out.
Yeah, I think. I think it's interesting. I don't know that Vaughn's to the place now where he sees Hawkins and Sterling as family. I think that's still going to take a while. He sees them as guys that he goes around with, and they help him, and he helps them, and he's responsible to protect them. But I don't know that he would see them as family yet. I honestly can't tell you what it's going to look like if and when he finds this out. But I know that he's still a little iffy with magic, which seems to be a little bit of a theme between my characters so far. At some point, I'm going to have to play a magic user so that I can kick this typecast. But yeah, I think it's going to be complicated in his mind to learn the details of how that actually worked, and because he understands how human procreation works, but to realize that you could create a fey being by a kiss, and then by doing that being manipulated, and all of it centered around magic, is going to be an interesting twist for him, and something that'll be fun to deal with.
Well, speaking of creation, you have chosen Way of the Kensei as a monk. And one of the features of that class is Way of the Brush. You gain proficiency with your choice of calligrapher's supplies or painter's supplies. I don't know, which one have you chosen?
Calligraphy.
Calligraphy is a process of creation. So it'd be interesting to kind of weave the themes of creation into however Vaughn decides to express calligraphy. So
yeah, it's such an interesting thing. Oh, sorry, I was going to say it's kind of a benign feature, but it might be the avenue that Vaughn then touches and reaches a different part of his brain, a different part of his being, and opens up a little bit more of that creative side, which then could potentially open him up a little bit more to the ideas of magic and how they work and the creativity behind them. So I hope, and I look forward to seeing how we can work together to make that not as benign as it seems.
Yeah, perfect, because I don't want anything to go to waste. And we're just talking now. We're just brainstorming, coming up with these ideas on how to make everything count on your character sheet. And Way of the Brush, helping Vaughn kind of tap into that magical essence through his key and through understanding the big wild world of magic. It could come through his love or his dedication to calligraphy, however he's learned that. And I did want to answer two questions. We talked about agile parry and Kensei shot. That's an interesting feature. You do not use any key points for that at all. It's just limited to once per turn. So that's it's a turn-based feature, but it really makes the monk gain a +2 bonus to armor class until the start of their next turn. And Kensei shot, you get to add damage, extra damage on top of that. So that I think the whole point of the Way of the Kensei monk is to make a monk that does a lot of damage and has a lot of weapon options, which is good. And hopefully those dice can be in your favor and you can roll really high.
Yeah, I think mechanically a monk is pretty beneficial to a party in the earlier levels. Damage per level is pretty good in the lower levels, and then falls off pretty significantly as time goes on. So I hope that the Way of the Kensei will allow me to continue to contribute to the party in a meaningful way and not just become a meat shield.
You studied about 1 year at Baldtop Library. What features did you pick up as a character?
So I picked up, let me get here. I picked up the Sentinel feat. So I started off early on with the mobile feat, and so the idea is I want to be able to tank and also able to retreat. And I also want to, when I'm tanking, if I don't want you to run away, I want to be able to keep you from running away. So Vaughn, my idea behind the build on Vaughn is no matter what the fighting situation, whether he's long distance with his bow or he's up close with his sword, that he's in control. If he doesn't want you to move, you don't get to move. If he wants to move, he gets to move. And so that's kind of where I'm at with that. I picked up Sentinel. I picked up the skill expert, and that was one where I could choose a proficiency. I could double a proficiency, and I could add 1 ability point. So I used the 1 ability point to increase my strength by 1, just to get that to an even number and increase my modifier. And then the proficiency I picked up was sleight of hand, and then I doubled my proficiency in stealth. So again, the idea is I can be where I want to be, when I want to be there, and you can't stop me. Yeah. And then my 7th point was Thieves' Tools. So not because he expects to go steal things, but just because he wants to be able to open door. I think the theme that's coming out now is that Vaughn wants to be in control. He wants to be in control of his situation, no matter where he's at, no matter what's going on. He wants to be the one that calls the shots and determines what happens.
Yeah, I was just thinking that control is a big theme around Vaughn, and perfection, right? He's perfect, he's aligned, he's in control. He doesn't let anyone get the best of him. I mean, there's a lot of themes around that. So creating a chaotic world, I can't believe. I mean, Boshin has fallen, and introducing this fairy creation process. I can see why he doesn't care for magic too much. It's just hard to understand. It's hard to control. It's hard to maintain. But I think maybe when Vaughn reaches that point of realizing how to control it and how to live interdependently with magic in this balanced way, I think that's really going to touch at the essence of who he is.
Yeah, I agree. I think he will get there. Obviously, as the key plays out a little bit more and he starts doing things that he can't rationally explain, that he can't come up with in his brain how that works, whether it's moving faster or striking more often or whatever those things are, he's going to have to come to terms with, yeah, maybe there is something outside of my physical ability that's at play here.
So one thing I love about these interviews is that other players get to listen to it and hear the creation process of the character. I hope this does inspire them, as well as inspire the players, Brandon and Patrick, to hear how Vaughn thinks and how they could play upon those themes, how it all connects together. I mean, it's without any big discussion on character development, I think we've created a really rich party cast, or a cast of characters here in this party. No two are alike. There's a little bit of overlap. For the most part, it's a very diverse and dynamic group of characters. I have enjoyed talking with you about playing the game, and I enjoy, of course, playing the game and telling the story together. I just want to say thank you for just pursuing with me in this whole endeavor. It's started out really small, just hanging out in our house and playing the games. And I'm just so glad we were able to continue it throughout the years. It's been almost 3 years of playing together. And it's been really memorable for me, memorable for my family. And just the kids saying, is Ted coming over to the house today? Is Ted going to bring food by today? You've been more than a friend, you've been a brother. And I've just really enjoyed getting to know you over the years.
I agree, Jonathan. It's been so much fun. I've been dying to get back into the game, and I played a different game in town for a little while, and it was great, but it was a little bit of a travel for me. And so to meet you and get to know you and see your passion for the game. And one thing I want to give you some credit for here is I always struggled to truly embrace characters, whether it's voices or things like that, and even struggled to fully develop their personalities, even in the background. And playing with you has freed me up in that and given me the I don't know if confidence is the right word, but just desire to play out a voice and to play out a persona and to live by it and make that a key feature in what we're doing. And it just makes the storytelling so much better. And so I could never go back to one of those standard games that happen so often where people are just sitting around the table and they always talk in a different person, and they're never truly representing their character. Yeah, I don't think I could ever do that again after getting to play with you all this time, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to learn more about the game from you, and then to get to participate with you, and obviously to get to know you as a person.
Thank you so much, Ted. That means a lot, and really hits home to why I do this and why I love telling stories. It really is about getting to know you and getting to know the people around my table and bringing all these stories to life together. And it takes two. It takes more than just one person to tell the story. It's not history. It's not my story. It's our story. Every conversation must come to an end. So now we conclude. Thank you for listening, Sojourners. Your attention will not go unrewarded, and we look forward to continuing many more conversations with you. And as always, may your story continue. If you liked this background music and ambiance, please go check out Tabletop Audio. You can find them at www.tabletopaudio.com.